All Summer in a Day, written by Ray Bradbury. It was raining. It had been raining for 7 years on the planet Venus. Venus was a world of grey forests and endless water. It had been raining there for 7 years without a stop. Every single day was filled with the heavy sound of falling water. There was no sun, only wild storms and dark clouds. This endless rain was very strong. The water broke and destroyed the old trees. But the forest did not die. New trees grew up very fast in the same place. The rain killed the nature, but it also gave new life to it. It was a strange, endless circle. To this wild planet, many years ago, the first people came from Earth. They were called the Rocket People. They left their old planet to build a new home here. Because of the terrible weather, they built a wonderful underground city with long tunnels. Inside this city, they had light, heat, and safety. Now, the children of these rocket people were 9 years old. They spent their whole lives in this underground world and went to school there. They did not remember the sun. They only knew the wet, dark planet. But their school was special. The classrooms were deep underground, but they had one big room on the surface. This room had giant glass windows. Finally, the special moment arrived. All the children gathered in the big room. Through the windows, they could look at the wild world outside and wait for a miracle. This was the most important day of their lives. The scientists said that soon, for only 1 hour, the rain would stop. The sun would come out. The children stood by the giant window of their underground school. They waited and looked outside in silence. "Are you ready?" one child asked. "Yes, we are ready." "Is it happening today? Are the scientists sure?" "Yes, don't worry, it will happen soon." The children stood close to each other. They looked out of the giant window and waited for the invisible sun. It was still raining. Margot stood alone, away from the other children. Like them, she was 9 years old. But the other children did not remember the sun at all. 7 years ago, the sun came out for only 1 hour. But they were too young then. They forgot its light. But the children talked and read about the sun every day. Their parents told them wonderful stories about Earth. So the children knew that the sun was like a warm yellow coin. It was a miracle that could buy the whole world. Sometimes at night, the children had beautiful dreams. They dreamed about the colour gold and the hot summer. In their sleep, they could feel the soft warmth on their faces, hands, and bodies. But every morning, they woke up to a terrible sound. The rain was hitting the roof like millions of small glass balls. Then their beautiful dreams disappeared like morning fog. "Look, the rain is stopping," someone shouted. "Yes, look, it is stopping." The classroom was full of noise. The children moved and laughed like a colourful carousel, but Margot was completely alone. She was a very weak and quiet girl. It looked like the 7 years of rain washed all the colours out of her. Her eyes were not blue anymore, her lips were not red, and her hair lost its gold. She looked like an old grey photo from a dusty album. When she spoke, her voice was as soft as a whisper. Now, she just stood by the glass window and looked at the wet world. "What are you looking at?" William shouted at her. Margot did not answer. "Answer me when I speak to you," William said, and pushed her. Margot did not move or run away. She was too sad to fight. The other children did not like Margot, and they always walked past her. She was different. When they played active games in the underground tunnels, Margot just stood and watched. When the class sang happy songs about games, she stayed quiet. She only sang when the songs were about the warm summer and the sun. But the biggest problem was her secret. Margot came to Venus from Earth only 5 years ago. She remembered the hot sun and the beautiful blue sky over Ohio. The other children lived on Venus their whole lives. They were only 2 years old when the sun went away, so they forgot everything. But Margot remembered. "The sun is like a coin," Margot said one day, with closed eyes. "No, it's not," the children shouted. "It is like a fire," she said, "like a warm fire in the kitchen." "You are lying," they cried. "You don't remember anything." But Margot remembered. She stood alone by the window and thought about Earth. She was truly different from the others. Last month, she refused to take a shower at school. She covered her ears with her hands and screamed, "The water must not touch me! It must not!" After that, the other children kept away from her. There was another big reason why the children hated Margot. People said that her parents wanted to take her back to Earth next year. It was very expensive, and it cost thousands of dollars. But for Margot, it was her only dream. The children were jealous because they had to stay on this cold, dark planet forever, while Margot could escape. "Go away," William pushed her again. "What are you waiting for?" For the first time, Margot turned and looked at him. Her eyes showed what she was waiting for: the sun. "Get out of here," William shouted angrily. "You will see nothing today. It is all a joke." He turned to the other children. "Nothing is happening today, right?" The children laughed and shook their heads. "No, nothing. It's a lie." "But today is the day," Margot whispered helplessly. "The scientists said the sun." "It's a fake story," William barked. He grabbed her arm. "Hey, let's lock her in the closet before the teacher comes." "No!" Margot cried, but she fell to the floor. The children caught her. Some children took her arms and others took her legs. They carried the crying girl down the dark tunnel. Margot tried to fight, but she was too weak. They opened the door of a small, cold closet. There were no windows inside, only darkness. The children pushed Margot into the room. She fell on the cold floor. Quickly, William closed the heavy door and turned the key. Margot ran to the door. She hit it with her small hands and kicked it with her feet. She screamed and cried, but her voice was muffled behind the thick door. The children stood outside. They looked at the shaking door and just smiled. Then they forgot about Margot, turned around and walked back to the classroom. At that moment, their teacher walked in. "Are you ready, children?" the teacher asked and looked at her watch. "Yes!" everyone shouted. "Is everyone here?" "Yes!" The rain stopped. The world became completely quiet. It was like a movie about a terrible storm that suddenly stopped, and a beautiful, peaceful picture appeared on the screen. The sun came out. It was giant, hot, and golden. The sky became a beautiful bright blue. The dark grey jungle suddenly shined in the warm light. The children ran outside, shouting with happiness. "Don't go too far," the teacher called after them. "You only have 2 hours. Be careful." But the children did not listen to her. They ran into the wild nature. They took off their jackets and put them on the grass. They opened their arms to the sun. The warm sunlight touched their skin like a hot, gentle hand. "This is much better than the electric lights in our city, right?" "Yes, much better." They ran into the heart of the jungle. The plants on Venus were strange. Because they lived without the sun for 7 years, they had no bright colours. They looked like grey stones, ink and ash. But now, under the sun, the giant trees grew very fast and opened new flowers in seconds. The children lay down on the soft, thick grass. They could hear the jungle breathing under them. They ran between the trees, played hide and seek, and laughed. They looked at the sun until they cried from the bright light. They put their hands up to the blue sky and breathed the fresh air. They enjoyed the beautiful silence. They ran in circles like wild animals that finally escaped from a dark cave. They were absolutely happy, and they did not stop for a whole hour. Suddenly, one of the girls screamed. Everyone stopped running. "Look! Look!" she cried. The other children walked to her and looked at her open hand. In the centre of her hand, there was one big, round drop of rain. The girl began to cry. The children looked up at the sky. "Oh," someone whispered. A few cold drops of rain fell on their noses, cheeks, and lips. The sun disappeared behind dark clouds. A cold wind began to blow. The children turned around and walked back to their underground home with their hands in their pockets. The smiles completely disappeared from their faces. Suddenly, a terrible sound of thunder hit the air. The children were scared. They jumped close to each other like leaves in a strong wind, and then they ran. Lightning flashed closer and closer. The sky became as dark as midnight. The children stood at the door of their underground house until the heavy rain started. Then they closed the door. They heard millions of tons of water falling from the sky again. There was no end to it.
"Will it rain for 7 years again?"
one boy asked. Yes, 7 years. Suddenly, one child remembered something and started to cry. Margot! What? She is still in the closet, where we left her. Everything became completely quiet. The children froze. They could not move. They looked at each other, but then they quickly looked away. They looked outside at the endless rain. They were too ashamed to look into each other's eyes. They stood with pale faces and looked down at their hands and feet. Margot! Well? One girl asked softly. Nobody moved. Let's go, the girl whispered. They walked slowly down the dark corridor. The rain was hitting the ground outside. They turned and walked to the closet. Thunder rolled and the blue light of lightning flashed on their sad faces. They stopped near the door. Inside the closet, it was completely quiet. Slowly, they opened the door and let Margot